So one of the gayest things about me is that I do watch The Real Housewives. I don't watch all The Real Housewives because they're not, to me, all of equal weight. Some of the cities or casts are just more dull than others or more contrived than others. But the one that I have never stopped watching that I find the most interesting is The Real Housewives of New York, because their relationships to me always seem the most interesting, the most dynamic. So this season they introduced a black housewife, Ebony, to the cast of The Real Housewives of New York. And it's been really interesting to watch this season because you do see her come in and kind of like reprimand some of the other housewives and stop them in their tracks when they say something that's not kosher or not necessarily appropriate. So to watch them kind of like squirm some of the housewives who have been there for years and years and years and to just like simmer down and listen, it's really, to me, fascinating to watch, because historically some of them on the show have been notoriously tone deaf towards racial stuff, racial stereotypes, and how they've treated non-white people on the show who weren't housewives but were like, you know, in one scene in the background or whatever. And so it's interesting because with Black Lives Matter and all these cultural changes, political changes, you do see that they understand that they don't have the leverage now anymore. So they're listening to her, to Ebony, when she speaks and when she stands up for something that she feels is like a racial moment on the show. So speaking of that, there was one scene where Heather, this housewife, who otherwise is actually very much like an ally and stuff, but this was a moment that was kind of out of character for her, that she told Ebony, you know, you're really articulate. And Ebony's reaction was like, that's a microaggression. Like, you don't tell a black woman. I mean, everybody kind of knows, if you're like aware of this stuff, you know that you're not supposed to tell a black person they're articulate in America, because that is rooted in a stereotype that black people are typically not articulate. Like, that's a stereotype that you're noticing it because you're assuming a black person will not be articulate. Like, that's where that comes from. So people were shocked that like Heather didn't know that. And Ebony kind of like put her in her place about it. Heather apologized, and they had a little moment where they agreed that Heather's intentions weren't negative, and whatever, they moved on. But I thought this was really fascinating because this is one of those moments where I thought that if this had happened with another one of the housewives who was notoriously tone deaf with racial stuff and had said racist things in the past, I'd be like, yeah, for sure she's saying that because she's just ignorant. In this case, it was coming from like the one person in the group who was supposed to be like woke as a white person. And it was clear to me, and it was even clear to Ebony on the show, that her intentions were genuine. It was just kind of like a thing that she said, a compliment that, you know, is like a trigger for a lot of black people. And so I was thinking, like, at what point do you decide, though, whether something is a racial comment or a racial moment versus just an innocent, like an innocuous moment? In this case, just a compliment that had no underhanded, you know, agenda. And I think this very much applies to gay people too, right? Like, I have had gay friends and I have had black friends who, anytime something happens that they feel is a racist moment or a homophobic moment, they're instantly on defense, and they're like, this only happened because the person, you know, is dealing with a black person or is dealing with a gay person. And I've always been the one to be like, hold on, you have to be able to question that just maybe that's not what's happening. Of course, I'm sure many times it is happening, but we can't read people's minds. Like, you don't always know what somebody's really thinking, what their background is that has led to them saying that or doing that. I remember being in a shoe store once when I was like 19, and somebody asked me if the store had this shoe in like size 9 or something. And I was like, huh? Like, what? And then I realized, like, oh, they think I work here. And I was like, oh, I don't work here. And then it happened a second time at that same shoe store within like 10 minutes. And I looked at what I'm wearing, and it wasn't the brand colors at all. There was something on the back of my shirt. It was one of those like t-shirts you get in like high school or college for like participating in some random event once. And so on the back of my shirt, it said, your journey starts here, or something like that. So I was like, oh, maybe people are just thinking because of that, I must work here. But it wasn't even like, it didn't even say like staff or like something that would make you, or like a shoe symbol that would make you think like, oh, this person works here. And I remember thinking, if I didn't look the way that I look, like if I was like a black person or Latino, I would probably think this is a racial moment. Like these people are being racist. So it's interesting what's ingrained in us to assume that something is reflective of like a bigger, you know, a bigger complex, a bigger, not complex, a bigger theory, I guess. So from a gay perspective, an example would be like, I remember years ago, Anderson Cooper's partner, this was a long time ago, maybe like 10 years ago, his partner was found to be, by paparazzi, caught kissing some random guy in a park. And people instantly, you know, in the tabloids and stuff, they were like, oh my God, Anderson, our beloved Anderson Cooper is being cheated on. And immediately people, like on social media and stuff, I remember, I think, what's his name? Perez Hilton, I think, was one of the people who was like, wait. They're gay men. They're probably in an open relationship. Like, this doesn't have to be, you know, this scandalous thing. But then I remember thinking at that time, like, if this was a straight couple, nobody would be jumping to that conclusion. Nobody would be thinking, well, hold on, this doesn't have to be an affair. This doesn't have to be cheating. But then my next thought was, maybe some people would think that. Like, I don't know, because that's not the case we're talking about. In this case, we're talking about a gay couple, and people are reacting by saying they might be in an open relationship. So we can jump to conclusions that something is a racist moment or a homophobic moment or whatever, but we really don't know, because you're comparing it to like a hypothetical situation as opposed to reality. Anyway, I don't think there's a right and wrong answer. I think that life is all about perspective and the gray area anyway. And I think the more we claim to know truth, the worse off we tend to be. What do you guys think about this?